What happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? It's not a riddle. It's the situation currently unfolding between the United States and Iran, and the stakes couldn't be higher. A fragile ceasefire. A 14-day clock is ticking down. At the center of it all is one question that could determine whether the Middle East slides back into open conflict. Who controls Iran's uranium? Tonight, we will explain exactly why this dispute is so explosive, why both sides are digging in harder than ever, and what the next 2 weeks could mean, not just for Iran and America, but for the whole world. Stay with us. This one matters. Let's start at the beginning, because context is everything here. We are currently in the midst of a ceasefire. This is a temporary pause in one of the most intense periods of US-Iranian tension in decades. However, calling it a ceasefire feels almost generous because, beneath the surface, the two sides are not just disagreeing on tactics, they are disagreeing on the fundamental rules of the game. Here's what happened. Iran came to the negotiating table with a 10-point proposal, a framework they believed could form the basis of a lasting deal. Buried inside that proposal was a clause that Iran says recognized their right to enrich uranium, a clause that Iran claims recognizes their right to enrich uranium. Tehran was clear. This wasn't optional. It wasn't a bargaining chip. Iranian Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf publicly stated that the sixth clause of their proposal explicitly protected Iran's enrichment rights, and that any retraction of that clause would violate the truce itself. Washington's response? Equally clear and firm. The White House press secretary, the vice president, and the president himself all delivered the same message. That plan was never the agreed framework. The United States never accepted it. President Trump's red line, that there should be no uranium enrichment on Iranian soil, has not moved 1 inch. The White House was blunt. The idea that President Trump would ever accept an Iranian wish list as a deal is completely absurd. So here we are. Two sides, two completely different interpretations of what was agreed, and only 14 days to decide whether there is any way forward, or if this ceasefire was just a temporary reprieve before the next explosion. Now, let's discuss the substance itself, because the term uranium enrichment is used frequently, and it is important to understand exactly what is being discussed. Uranium enrichment is the process of increasing the concentration of a specific uranium isotope, U-235, to make it usable. The level of enrichment determines everything. 3.67% is civilian grade, enough to power a nuclear energy reactor. It is harmless in terms of weapons. This is what Iran agreed to under the JCPOA, the 2015 nuclear deal. 20%. Research grade. Still not weapons-grade material, but a significant step up. 60%. This is where the alarm bells start ringing. According to IAEA Chief Rafael Grossi, Iran currently holds approximately 440 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60%. 90% plus. That's weapons-grade uranium. That's a bomb. Here's the chilling part. Going from 60% to 90% is, in technical terms, a relatively short journey. The hard work is already done. The centrifuges do the rest, or at least they would if the centrifuges still existed. According to the IAEA's May 2025 report, Iran's centrifuge infrastructure at key facilities, including those at Natanz, Fordow, and Isfahan, was significantly damaged in military strikes. As experts remind us, centrifuges are extraordinarily delicate instruments. You can't simply switch them back on. Rebuilding that capacity takes time, expertise, and resources. But what nobody disputes is that 440 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium is still out there. Grossi indicated that most of it is believed to be stored in tunnel complexes at Isfahan. It wasn't destroyed in the strikes, deliberately, as destroying it would have risked a catastrophic radioactive event on Iranian soil, so the uranium exists. The enrichment infrastructure, however, is severely damaged, and both Washington and Tehran are aware of this. This material is at the heart of the current negotiations. Let's hear the arguments from both sides, because this isn't a straightforward tale of good versus evil. It's the story of two governments, each with their own logic, history, and fears. From Washington's perspective, Vice President J.D. Vance offered the most memorable soundbite of the crisis when responding to Iran's enrichment claims with a domestic analogy. He said, and we're paraphrasing, that his wife has the right to go skydiving, but she doesn't, because they have an agreement. What matters isn't what someone claims the right to do, but what they actually do. It's a folksy analogy. However, the underlying message is serious. The United States isn't interested in debating legal rights. They're interested in physical realities. The physical reality they want is simple: no enrichment, no stockpile, and no pathway to a bomb. President Trump himself reinforced this on Truth Social, stating that there would be no uranium enrichment and that the United States would work with Iran to remove what he described as deeply buried nuclear dust, a reference to the remnants of last year's strikes. Iran's argument, on the other hand, rests on international law. As a signatory to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, Iran maintains that it has a legal right to enrich uranium for civilian purposes. They argue that this right was recognized in their 10-point proposal and cannot simply be erased by American demands. However, Tehran's position is driven not only by legality, but also by history. Dr. Tara Kartha, former director of India's National Security Council Secretariat, framed this with striking clarity. Iran was a party to the JCPOA. The IAEA confirmed that Iran was in compliance. Enrichment was capped at 3.67%. The breakout timeline was measured at 1 full year. The deal was working. Then, in 2018, the United States withdrew. Not because Iran had violated the deal, but for reasons that, as Dr. Kartha put it, were best known to the president himself. What were the consequences? A country that had virtually no weapons-grade material under the JCPOA monitoring regime is now sitting on hundreds of kilograms of uranium enriched to 60%, and with considerable justification is saying, why should we give this up when we gave it up before and it got us nothing? So, what does this mean for us? We are within a 14-day ceasefire period. Analysts are watching 3 things very closely. Firstly, the question of enrichment itself. Will Iran agree to any framework that includes halting enrichment? Currently, Tehran's answer is no. However, real negotiations often begin with both sides saying no. The question is whether there is a face-saving formula that gives Iran what it needs politically while providing the US with the verification it demands. Secondly, there is the question of what will happen to the existing stockpile. This may actually be the more solvable problem. During the 3rd round of Oman-mediated talks, there were reports that Iran had indicated a willingness to blend its enriched uranium into lower-grade fuel for civilian energy use, which would effectively neutralize it without the political drama of giving it to America. Whether formal or informal, that offer is worth watching. If it's still on the table, it could provide a genuine way out. Thirdly, the military question. Let's be honest about what lies beneath all of this. The ceasefire exists in the shadow of military action that has already occurred and of military capability that remains on standby. Both Israel and the United States have signaled that if this 14-day period does not result in meaningful progress, operations will resume. The question isn't just whether Iran is enriching uranium. It's about whether the current government in Tehran intends to remain a state that pursues nuclear weapons, builds ballistic missiles, and funds proxy forces across the region. That's the tripartite demand on the table. So far, there has been no indication that Tehran is ready to accept all 3 terms. What often gets lost in the back and forth of daily news cycles is this. This point deserves emphasis. Nobody actually wants a nuclear-armed Iran. Not the United States, not Israel, not the Gulf states, not India. In fact, not even most of the international community does. The disagreement isn't over the destination, it's over the path. The JCPOA approach was to bring Iran into a verified, monitored framework. Limit enrichment, extend breakout time, build trust incrementally. This approach was imperfect, but it was working until it wasn't. The current approach is to apply maximum pressure through military strikes and demand complete capitulation on enrichment before offering any sanctions relief. Both approaches have their logic. However, both approaches have their fatal flaws. The JCPOA's flaw was that it required sustained political commitment across multiple administrations, a commitment which proved impossible to maintain. The flaw in the maximum pressure approach is what we are witnessing in real time. When you corner a government and offer it no credible pathway to dignity or survival, compliance is not forthcoming. You get exactly what we're seeing: A harder line, a more nationalist public, and a leadership that has staked its legitimacy on not backing down. Dr. Kartha's insight here is worth considering. Iran has been repeatedly betrayed by the United States. This is not a political talking point. It is a documented sequence of events. And it matters because once broken at this scale, trust does not easily return. The real question over the next 2 weeks isn't just about uranium percentages and centrifuge counts. It's about whether the two sides can establish enough mutual trust or self-interest to create a framework that neither side will be ashamed of. So, here's what you need to watch out for in the days ahead. Pay attention to the language coming out of Oman. The Omani mediators have played a crucial, albeit quiet role throughout this process. If there is progress in the back-channel talks, you will see it first in the tone of Omani diplomatic statements. Watch the IAEA. Rafael Grossi and his team offer the most credible independent insight into Iran's nuclear program. Any new report or any new access granted or denied to a site is a signal, not noise. Watch the stockpile question. If Iran agrees to any form of verified removal or conversion of the 60% uranium stockpile, even under a face-saving formula, that would be a meaningful development. If they don't, the gap between the two sides may simply be unbridgeable right now. Most importantly, watch the clock. 14 days is not a long time. In diplomacy, 2 weeks can work miracles. It can also achieve nothing. What we do know is that the ceasefire is fragile. The red lines are real on both sides, and there is barely any margin for error. This is the uranium standoff, and it is far from over. I'm your name. Thank you for watching. If you found this breakdown useful, please subscribe, share it, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. We read everyone. We'll be tracking this story closely, and we'll be back with updates as they develop. Stay informed, stay critical. See you next time.